so. Andrew Reed is still improving. Tammy and Mike Pitts are going to Houston on February 11th, which is this Sunday. Charlene Dumas, Becky Morton has blood clots. Julie Duty is going to have a second cataract surgery on the 14th. Bruce Babcock, Ms. Mildred's son, not doing well. He's in the hospital because of chemo side effects. That is Bruce, isn't it, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. Wayne Hudson is getting well. He said he intends to be here Sunday. Michelle Brantley, Bruce Patton. Did I see Jerry? Can you enlighten us about what's going on with Bruce, please?
He's started radiation and chemotherapy today, and he's still at St. Francis.
Okay. I heard that on Facebook or something that they found some more cancer. Is that true?
Yeah, he had surgery to move a tumor from his spine.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's certainly pray for him. Miss Bobby Savage, that's Tammy and Gary Savage's mother. She's had some high blood pressure, but I just saw Tammy and she said she was doing better when she left the facility a while ago. Kylie, this is Billy and Sharon's granddaughter, is in labor and hopefully to deliver soon. Now I bet she ain't nobody hoping more than she is. Okay. Anybody else y'all know of that we need to pray for? Okay, Mr. General, would you lead us, please?
Holy Father in heaven, we're just so thankful to be here tonight, be able to study your word, Father, and we just pray for Gary that you'll give him a good recollection of everything that he has to say to us, and we just pray that you'll just continue to be with him and bless him, Father, and be with all these people that Jim just got through telling us about it in need of our prayers, Father, and you know all the needs that they have and everything, and we just pray that it's your will that you can take care of them, Father, and help them to get feeling better, and the ones that's having surgery and all, that everything will go well with them, and the ones that's got the flu and all, and still having fever and all, we just pray for all of them, Father, that you'll take care of them, and we just thank you for Jesus, and we thank you that we have the Bible where we can sit down and study it and learn from it, and we just pray that you'll just continue to be with us and have mercy on us and forgive us, and we thank you for Jesus, that is all in his name. Amen.
We are finishing probably our study of the Pharisees tonight. We're in Matthew 23 and two more woes, longer verses, but two woes there that will be mentioned. We will begin a new study. I'm going to call it Encounters with God. And the first encounter will be Cain and Abel. If you want to begin looking at that story, Cain and Abel, we studied Adam and Eve in another forum in studying Satan. So Cain and Abel, and some lessons there that are important for our time. Very relevant material there for our time. The Beatitude, Matthew 5, verse 8, we're comparing the woe to a beatitude. And it's the opposite, of course. Matthew 5, verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And obviously purity, the heart is the very seat of who we are. It represents what we say, think. It's so much is there, and because we're not studying the Beatitudes, we'll only make the cursory comments that would apply, but it's certainly the idea of seeing God, Who you are, what you are is represented in that beatitude, and the reward is the best of all rewards. So they would have known that, and of course Jesus taught it early in his ministry. But in Matthew 23, verse 25, we have the next section of woes, and there's actually two that we put together, verse 25 through 28. We'll look at this evening. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Now, Jesus, when he makes that statement, is talking about habits, traditions, oral traditions of declaring something to be clean and unclean. And it's true with the next woe as well. And he, again, is saying something that I could not say were I living then. You could not say that. We can't see the inside of someone with specificity to say you're greedy and self-indulgent. And we can maybe guess in certain actions or certain comments something about the inner man, but it's not something we can say with certainty. But obviously Jesus could, and he did. And what he's telling them is you're spending a lot of time on externals and no time on internals. And we talk about that in principle a lot as New Testament Christians. It's not coming to the building and sitting here and checking off the fact that I've attended worship. Although we're not to forsake the assembly, as it was already the habit of some in the book of Hebrews, not that many years after the resurrection and the ministry of Jesus. But that is just the beginning of what's important. And what it's saying to us is you need to be in the worship, but you need to be involved in the worship rather than just sitting here. If your mind is thinking about LSU basketball tomorrow night, and you're not concentrated on why you're here and what you're doing, and singing praises and letting the words have an impact, and hearing prayers and taking them in and making plans to act upon some of the things prayed, it's the inward that also matters. It's like when he said earlier, you give a tenth of your spices, verse 23, mint, dill, and cumin, but you've neglected the important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And then he says both of them should be practiced. And so our over-concern with external, what do people see? What can I suggest to people by what they see? And whether we like it or not, we find ourselves thinking about that maybe more than we should. And he's saying you're all caught up on the inside compared to the outside, and the inside is not at all what it ought to be. It's filled with greed and self-indulgence. And we saw in one of the woes earlier that they were accused of, and sometimes apparently would steal from widows, even confiscating property that would belong to widows. Greed would cause that. Self-indulgence is thinking so much about self and how whatever you're doing can benefit yourself. It's all about me rather than them. if you were engaged in some activity or working with a group of people. To be self-indulgent, you're concerned about self, almost to the exclusion of other people. I want us to understand the degree that they took it to. To declare something unclean, there were times certainly in the Old Testament that things were considered unclean. But they took that principle to great exaggeration, to represent uncleanliness based upon whether you washed your hands a certain amount or a certain time before eating. And that's not to suggest that you should not wash your hands before you're eating today. But they had it set up to where it's more of an outward thing. It wasn't because your hands were dirty. It's just a declaration that they took upon themselves to declare something as unclean and expect you to honor that and to keep that tradition. And it was not from God, many of the things that they did. We did something when our children were old enough to hear us and play away from the house. My mom used to, I was the second of 9, and Mom used to pretty much holler downstairs. We lived in a 2-story house, kitchen upstairs. And she would holler, everyone get ready for supper. And that meant be close and be ready. And we changed that when we had children. We had first call and second call. First call means you wash your hands and you come into the area where the kitchen is. And second call means walk to the table. But it gave them a warning. It gave them preparation. It let us know that it was going to be an orderly event to bring them from the back of the house when it's time to eat. Another thing we did, when they were playing away from the house, Tara would go outside and say, "Children!" And what do most of us say growing up when you hear Mom and Dad saying children? The answer is, "What?" And that just infuriated Terry. She was not ready to carry on the conversation when they were 200 yards back in the field. And so with a little bit of training, "Children," and the only answer that was acceptable, and it was immediate, "Coming," because she would not be calling to you unless she needed you to come. "What?" That ended after just a few days, or they were grounded. "Coming." But you set up things that make sense, they're orderly. I'm not suggesting that it would reach a point of punishment or declaring someone as a sinner, but we all have things that we set into place that's an orderly arrangement based upon what you're about to do. To declare a cup unclean was much more than just whether it was properly washed and now it's ready to be used. And we don't even relate to the way that they would declare something like that unclean. Let me apply it if I could. Solving problems. How easy is it for us to keep the outward appearance looking good while ignoring the inside condition? That's the question or the statement that lets us begin to apply what we're hearing. Is your marriage dissolving? Can you hide it? Or would it be better just to deal with it? Find an older couple, let them serve as your mentor, and maybe even go sit down with a counselor from time to time. Read a book. Go to YouTube. There's plenty of things. Is it easier to just leave it the way it is, and the marriage dissolve, and hiding it or dealing with it. That's the principle that he's discussing. Are your friendships hurting? Why? Is it easier just to act like everything's okay, outward, external, compared to self-examination and trying to make some improvements? This concept is very much alive and well in our life. Is your job at risk? Is it easier to give the impression there's nothing wrong, and then one day it blows up on you? Or decide I need to examine and make changes? External, internal, again, can affect all of us. You live as though nothing were wrong and behave as though everything was okay. That's hiding. It's denial. It usually never works out, but it's accenting the external compared to the internal. Or you get to the core issues and deal with them. And of course, that's problem solving. One writer says, what's your sense of purpose and your direction? What are you living for? Who are you trying to be? Evaluate those things. Instead of putting up a facade, everything's okay. Answer the hard questions and make necessary changes. Certainly is the application. Remember, this is based on the premise that unless our righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, there's no place for us in the kingdom. Our righteousness has to exceed the thinking that I'm going to deal with external and not internal. I'm going to pretend instead of admitting what could change or what I would need to change. That principle is alive and well as we're seeking after the righteousness of God. The next one is amazing. It's found in verse 27, and it relates to pure in heart, for you to see God. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Now he's used 4 words as it would apply to them about similar situations, external, internal. One of them, they were full of greed and self-indulgence. And the other, they were full of hypocrisy and wickedness. And it all goes around their attitude toward a dead person. And that's what he's alluding to when he talks about whitewashed tombs. The Pharisees, and the Jews for that matter, wanted nothing to do with dead bodies. And I'm not talking about dead bodies as far as the need to take care of them and bury them. They had very strict rules about that. They needed to be in the ground by 6 at night, the same day. But they did not ever want to walk across an area of ground and actually walk across an area where there was a tomb, where someone was buried. And to avoid that at all costs, they would whitewash the area to clearly designate where the body was buried. And it let them know, I cannot walk there. I cannot touch that place. And he says, you use that so as to avoid being unclean. And you go to great trouble to designate with whitewash appearance to make certain you know where the graves are. And yet look at yourself. You are beautiful on the outside, but on the inside you're full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. So again, he's using an example they would relate to describe their hearts, their thinking, their hidden values. When we lived in Andalusia, Alabama, I walked up a hill about as steep probably as the street in front of our house, Jackson Street, not as long, but a pretty good grade. And it was the church's graveyard. And some of the tombstones were 1920, 30, 40, 50. And many of the members, it's their relatives who were buried there. And they will be buried there. And as family, they've reserved plots, and they allowed outside members to consider being buried there, but they weren't necessarily trying to fill it up because they know it's going to be full enough soon enough. I tell you that to say this. It's very sobering to begin every day for 2 years walking through a cemetery. What would come to your mind to do that?
Walking faster.
What, Jim?
Walking faster.
Walking faster, there you go. Right?
When's your turn?
Yeah. You just, immortality, or your mortality. We had 4, 5, 6 members while we were there, buried there, older. We also had a 16-year-old girl who was murdered. 2 family units there, grandparents, uncles, murdered in the community, buried there. It's sobering. There's a benefit to being around a graveyard. You appreciate being alive. You are faced with your mortality, and you're ready to get into the office, or you're ready to get into the house. You are walking fast. I used to say it, I would still say it if I were around young people. The best thing that they can do is to go to a funeral from time to time. Now, I'm not wishing anyone in their family dead to say that. I'm not wishing any harm to any person to say that. But Solomon describes it, and it's the reality. When you're around death, you think of life, and you appreciate life, and you evaluate your life. A lot of good and introspection will take place during those times. They abused it instead of using it as a benefit to look at their life and be sure they were living as they should, that they were under the whole law. So to be pleasing to God in observing the commands. The Pharisees missed it in every way, as these woes proclaim. And even around death, they made it such a phobia, such an oxymoron, that they whitewashed the tombs and stayed as far away from them as they could, when there could be benefit to look at life and be introspective and appreciate the fact that you're still alive. But they put on a beautiful appearance. Inside, definitely not so much. Not so much. Observations?
We're still exposed to that today when we go shopping. We see a lot of shiny things. Inside, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to tell you something, and be sure you hear the second half of my comment after I make the statement at the beginning, and I'm warning you. I was raised in a home. We weren't super conservative, if you will. Mom and Dad weren't legalistic at all. We were very mainstream in our teachings and all of that as far as growing up in the church. But Mom and Dad insisted that we wear slacks and a collared shirt to worship. No blue jeans, no tennis shoes. Slacks and a collared shirt. And I made that statement a number of years ago when we were in South Florida. And I hesitated for just a moment. I did not give them a warning. I hesitated for just a moment, and I said, but I will fight to the nth degree of your right to wear something different. The only mandate we have as far as worship and dress is to be modest. And one of the elders immediately came and says, my mom and dad were the same way. Slacks and a collared shirt. No t-shirts, slacks and a collared shirt. So I understand what you were saying. I have yet to wear a pair of blue jeans to Sunday, Wednesday assemblies. Don't plan to. I have plenty of slacks. But I will fight to the death your right to choose that. You hear what I'm saying? That's just the way Mom and Dad raised us. And that's not to suggest that my 5 brothers and sisters or brothers still alive don't occasionally wear something different. The point is, they were concerned with going to worship. That's the way they wanted us to dress. But they were very quick to say dressing in slacks and a collared shirt, or a shirt with a collar, sounds better. What you did in the assembly mattered. Did you participate? When you're old enough, did you help? Did you wait on the table? Did you sign up to read Scripture when they need people to sign up to read Scripture? But they were concerned in their thinking of what it looked like as far as their children. And I'm going to say it for the 3rd time, I will fight to the death your right to wear what you choose.
Well, your parents had every right to set guidelines for how they wanted their children raised. I know a lot of people that went to schools that had dress codes and, you know, and I had, when I was in high school, we had to have a tuck shirt and hair, you know, a certain way. And if it wasn't that way, you got the opportunity to either be punished or sent home, or if you're an athlete, you got to run it.
So I guess, and Kent just shared the same idea, there is some thinking in some people's mind to the outward. All the churches in Sacramento, we were there a little over 2 years before we went to China. All the churches in the area were encouraged to come together for an afternoon worship once a year. And many of them would not meet in the evening so that we could come together, fill the assemblies wherever we were, and worship together. It is just a way for us to show the unity that we wanted in that community. And the first time we went to one of the congregations, it happened to be one of the larger congregations, and I'm going to say it. Here's what went through my mind, and I'm going to let you hear it. Look at that yo-yo up there. And that's a term that says that guy's crazy. He was up there with a sweatshirt and a pair of shorts, serving communion. And I was shocked. He may have never done it again, but apparently he thought it was okay that day. 400 people from several churches up there with a sweatshirt and a pair of shorts and tennis shoes. Now, what does that say about his idea of the importance of communion? And he may have thought it was fine, and he may have the highest regard for communion. But what does it say? What does it represent? And I'm not suggesting it takes a coat and a tie.
Is it breaking traditions?
Yeah, and I don't think that was the norm for that congregation. It was just very disappointing. It's very disappointing. And again, he may have the highest regard for communion, but he didn't show it. He didn't show it by his appearance that afternoon.
Is it one of the minor prophets, Malachi, who says, scolded Israel for not sacrificing their best and giving spotted animals and lame animals as
Yeah.
sacrifice?
Yeah, they robbed God by the lack of the imperfect, or by offering the imperfect sacrifices. In other ways, those 3 chapters, there's other ways they robbed God. You understand what I'm saying, hopefully.
Well, we're talking time and place for everything under heaven, and you gotta kind of think about it, it's a time to be wearing attire
Yeah.
in a worship.
Yeah. And again, I wouldn't expect him to have on a dress shirt, maybe even a tie and coat in the afternoon. The mandate we are given is modesty. And anything different than that is opinion. When we moved to Florida, there were 3 elders, and the first several weeks and months that we were there, we met every month. And I had made the determination, I'm going to sit here and be as quiet as I can and just learn about these elders. See how they conduct themselves. See what they judge to be important in their meetings. See how quickly they come to a consensus about issues or whatever. And one of the deacons had asked to meet with the elders one Sunday. I'd been there 3 or 4 months by then. And he had a very specific idea in his mind that if you're going to wait on the table, you should have on a coat and a tie and a dress shirt and dress slacks, or you can't serve on the communion. And I just sit back and listened. And that was a longer discussion. He wanted to mandate more than was necessary, in my mind. You can be modest without having that degree of dress, if you will. And after about 15 minutes, it took several comments and several what if, they came to realize we are not going to determine that someone cannot serve based upon that level of opinion. But we're going to encourage that they dress in a way that shows the importance of what they're doing. And they left it to them. No one ever walked in with sweatshirts, and no one ever walked in with shorts like we saw across town that Sunday. And there were all manner of modest clothing. And it was acceptable. Sometimes we would like to legislate, and good intentions. Anyway, let's go to the next beatitude, and it's the last long one. We have to do it quickly, but it doesn't require that much.
Can I make one quick comment?
Butch? I mean, David? I'm sorry.
About the cemetery, going to the graveyard and
Yeah.
cemetery, I think it was sobering to us as well. I was one today where a lot of people here from this church are, and my parents. Anyway, walk through there and look at the people that you knew well, and look at the day they died, and how long, in other words, some of them may be dead 10 years, you say, no way, they've been dead 10 years. The point I'm making is how time is getting by us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a lot of lessons. If anyone ever asked me from Hollywood, I have an idea for a great sitcom. No one's ever asked me. I've only shared it twice in my life. To me, they ought to show a man or a woman or both driving up to a cemetery and reading a headstone, and then the show is revealing who they are. Who were they? How did they live? Where did they come from? What did they do? What did they contribute to this community? To me, it would make an amazing nightly or weekly presentation to look at people's lives. And you're going to find all manner of skeletons in family closets, but you're also going to find the sinner as well as the saint. I think it would make a very, very good presentation that at least I would watch. Matthew 5 verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Persecution against the prophets, the peacemakers. The idea is you're being persecuted without cause. Listen to what he says about them. Verse 29, Matthew 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law, Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our forefathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the sin of your forefathers. It's easy to look back and say, look what they did, but if we had been there, we would not have done it. And of course, what did they do within weeks to the Son of God? What had they done to John the Baptist? They were guilty of treating prophets in similar ways. And he says you will admit that what they did was wrong. And you'll look back and say these things about the forefathers. Essentially, he says, look in the mirror. Look at the way you're treating the people that are speaking on behalf of God today. And of course, him. Every single apostle, except for John, died a martyrdom death. It's because of the Jews primarily, and it would have been perpetuated by Pharisees, gladly. And so that is one of the more obvious of the woes. And they were willing to admit something from the past as if it would not be the same thing here today in their life. And he brings it up. Verse 33, you snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I'm sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. That's what Saul did. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zachariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation. So outside, inside, but also suggesting that you're better than the prophets, than your forefathers. And yet you're admitting how the prophets were treated by your forefathers. and you will do no different. You will do no different. Again, don't see Jesus as screaming, angry, high blood pressure, his eyes bulging out, his face red from the capillaries. That's not what he was about. I'm sure he spoke with force. I'm also sure he spoke wanting them to hear from the Son of God and make necessary changes. This is who you are. Do something about it. Change. And of course, that's what he came to do. That's what he came to bring about. I'm through. I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll take them back some other time.
Well, me and my sister was always taught to wear your best. Wear your best at church.
Yeah. Yeah, and the best is different for some people, but at least let it, David was saying when he was younger and others, give your best, do your best.
You know, when I was a young person, early 60s, late 50s, just about on Sunday morning, just about every man, adult man, had on the sick guy.
Yeah. I don't know of any time in my ministry that I've told people to move from the front or to the front from wherever they were sitting. And the reason I have fought that temptation is because in some of the places where I've been, some of the most godly people were in the back 4 or 5 pews. And it's beyond me to think that I should tell people where they should sit. I don't do it.